And so we wanted to create a panel of artist activists to see what the border of this is. I'll just say very briefly, the Riot and Riotous Excursions, when we were, Sanaz, the co-curator, and I were talking about this, really evoked for us something like the Stonewall Uprising of 1969, as well as some of the work in the late 60s done by the Black Panthers, the Gay Liberation Front, and other movements. And we thought, some of these paradigms of the late 60s and this relationship between art and activism are still current, still valuable touchstones, models maybe even to follow, and some paradigms or tactics, strategies, ways of thinking may need to get completely thought through and have so been thought through by very many people. So it's a real privilege to have this little experiment in programming for the festival, but I'm thrilled for this panel, thrilled that you're here, and I'll turn it over to Mei Ann Teo, who is the moderator of this event. Thank you.
Let's gather in a circle. So if you could all come in here. There is video, we want to share it later on, so even though we can speak and hear each other without these mics, we'll do it for the rest of people. But yes, let's gather. There's so many beautiful seats over there. Yes, thank you.
Testing.
Come on in. Let's stand. Let's breathe. Let's make this a call to action. I would like each of us to go around. We're small enough that we can do this. If you can say your name, and if you would like to, add your pronoun, so that we know who's in the room, and we know how we can stand accountable to each other, and hold each other up as we hear the incredible work that these three are able to share with us, to inspire us on, and to receive all that you are bringing into this room right now for our sake as well. So, Mei Ann, she and they.
Anna, she, her.
Patrick, he, his.
Michael, he, him, his.
Patrick, he, him.
Talia, he, him.
Frankenstein.
Gio Geller, we.
Melissa.
Rich.
Kathleen, she, her.
David, he, him.
Jasmine, she, her.
Guy, he, him.
Cat like meow, she, her.
Savitri, I'm fluid.
Jabari, he, him.
Thank you. Let's sit together. Last night, I found myself at the Park Avenue Armory, sitting at the feet of Satoshi Miyagi's Antigone. And there was some text that I felt rang so true that I thought that in the lineage of great literature and theater globally, we could bring into the room. Ishmini says, "But oh, Antigone, think how much more terrible than these our own death would be if we should go against Creon and do what he has forbidden. We are only women, we cannot fight with men, Antigone. The law is strong. We must give in to the law in this thing and in worse. I beg the dead to forgive me, but I am helpless. I must yield to those in authority, and I think it is dangerous business to always be meddling." Antigone responds, "If that is what you think, I should not want you, even if you ask to come. You have made your choice. You can be what you want to be, but I will bury him, and if I must die, I say that this crime is holy. I shall lie down with him in death, and I shall be as dear to him as he to me." I'm so grateful to be here with these three who actively put their bodies, their full bodies and spirits in the line of fire, who commit holy crimes. And I wanted to open up by allowing them to have the space to share like what their work is in this time and age that we are in. Would you like to start?
Sure. So hi, everybody. Again, my name is Jabari Brisport, he, him. And I came into activism through the arts. Actually, I think one of the first pieces I created when that I was very proud of was a spoken word about gay marriage, back when state after state was just saying that it was going to be illegal. And it was very personal to me, and I had a chance to go back and perform it at my high school, and like, you know, and I encourage other people to like talk about their experiences as well. But most recently, I've shifted away from the arts. I'm actually a public school teacher now in Crown Heights. I teach math at a middle school on Nostrand Avenue. And I'm also a politician, activist into electoral politics. I ran for office in 2017 for city council. And actually, I got arrested protesting for housing, which would be like my act of civil disobedience, my holy crime. There was this really nasty housing development happening in Crown Heights called the Bedford Union Armory Project, and it was like a full citywide block that had been an armory, like a place where you store like arms and weapons and stuff, but was like empty, and the city was like, what are we gonna do with it? And this developer called BFC Partners came in wanting to convert it into luxury condos and like really expensive fancy apartments with like a nice gymnasium for the community and like, you know, some fancy, a few like nonprofits would come in there, but people were up in arms because of the condos. This was a neighborhood in like the middle of Crown Heights where people are getting evicted left and right because the rents are just going skyrocket. Gentrification is like, the crest of it is right in that neighborhood. And so we were protesting the city project, and I actually got detained once, then arrested later. So I got detained at this one meeting where there's like 5 stages in like, you know, rezoning a lot. And there was one at the CPC, the City Planning Commission. So we were protesting, just shouting for them to vote no. Me and my friend got pulled away, detained to the side by the cops, handcuffed, questioned, but not actually brought to jail. And then about a week later, we were protesting, and we were just blocking the street. And we got hauled in the van. And one of the funniest and most interesting takeaways for me from that time was that while we were, you know, in the holding cells, a lot of the cops in the jail were asking us, what were you protesting exactly? Like, why were you in the streets? And we were telling them about the Armory project, and they were like, yeah, man, it's like housing is all about money. Like, yeah, that's really sucks. It's all about business. And then on the way out, they told us, well, we hope you win. Like after like locking us up, they were like, well, we hope you win. That really sounds like a terrible deal. Yeah, we stopped there. Or you have your own.
I'm Savitri, and thank you for inviting me here today. Thank you all for coming. I direct Reverend Billy and the Stop Shopping Choir, which is a radical performance community here in New York City of about 50 people. We've been working maybe 20 years, I guess, in New York on a wide range of issues. We began resisting consumerism in the broadest sense. They're at the tail end of the anti-globalization movement. That swiftly turns into like an anti-gentrification movement, protecting neighborhoods, small shops. And then, of course, 2001, September 11th, totally changes the game for activists in New York City, militarized police, very changed street life, and then, of course, the continuation of that gentrification and that kind of what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism right here in our city, which we are living still in the midst of as the gentrification radiates away from Manhattan into places like East New York, Crown Heights. So our work for about 10 years was really just holding the street. It was really about just being theatrical on the street, being the last people who could be out there. I would say around 2004, we were just getting our asses kicked by the police pretty often. Some of you might remember the last big anti-war movement protest in 2003, resisting the Iraqi war, when there was, you know, maybe 6 million people protesting around the world, and it was just called a focus group. And to me, that was sort of the death knell of protest as we knew it. And you saw people holding it down for a long time. Occupy Wall Street comes along into the sort of rift of the 2008-2009 recession. There was a little breathing space. Activists could work again. And Occupy, you know, some would say sort of balkanized the protest movement. Some would say it atomized the protest movement. I think there's good and bad there, but it definitely blew it up. It blew it apart. And I think finally, in a very positive way, it made a lot of space in the few years following when Black Lives Matter emerges, Standing Rock, this incredible change in the culture, making space for leadership, long, long overdue leadership in invisible ways, for people of color, for movements of color, for indigenous women, leading now to what I see right now is this just incredible moment in protest when indigenous women, women of color, immigrant-led movements are happening, emerging. We don't always see these stories, we don't know what they are, but they are happening. And I feel lucky to live at a time when that is really happening. I hope we can keep the fan beating that fire so it burns brighter and brighter. But yeah, I also came from the arts, and I don't, the intersection of arts and activism is a dangerous one, sometimes precarious for both sides, but I'm happy we can talk about it today.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm a freelance theater maker, performance maker, culture shaker, story shaper kind of thing. I often work as a dramaturg, in and with community, performer, director, etc. What are some of the things that we could talk about today? I think the idea of infiltration, the artistic impulse to respond to moments of crises, direct action, whether or not an artistic impulse can fit within that. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep it short, simple, and cute. And I'm new to New York. I'm from New Orleans originally. My dad is from Nicaragua. My mom is a Cajun lady from Southwest Louisiana. And I've kind of been all over the place in terms of my training and working and etc. But I moved to New York well, I just made my 1-year anniversary, actually. Yeah, living in Queens, like Eddie Murphy and Coming to America. Yeah, hit me.
Thank you. I think that what you're talking about already in terms of the artistic impulse within activism and that precarious border, you said, or that precarious thing of like, how do we move between these two? Like, let's go right into that. Like, how do you think about activism and art, and how do you think about the artistic impulse here and there, and what feeds the other, what stops the other? You talk more about that?
So I guess I should say, primarily I work with and alongside undocumented people, migrants, recently asylum seekers. And just as a way of example of just diving into the deep end, of course, I would like to think we all know what's happening at our border, not just our border, but many borders. The militarization of the border, et cetera, which lives in a long, long history. And I was part of an email chain, or actually was part of that chain, and then it independently was forwarded to me. Somebody wanting to respond, to make a piece, right, at a detention center, and trying to get people together to respond to this crisis, and I think what's so precarious about this wanting to respond, having an impulse to respond, having a desire to do something, is that it places the fulfillment of that need, right, in oneself. And so often the most impactful thing is the smallest thing. I think so often people are rattled out of their own experience, right? It's when we are confronted with something that makes us realize what we are living within that is invisible to us, the amount of privileges that we have. That's when we feel like we need to do something. We need to do something. And so often I think folks become incurious about the experiences of others and are really leading from what they see from their own experience as the need. Where if you ask somebody within that experience that you're wanting, right, desiring to serve, to uplift, it's so often it's like the smallest thing, volunteering, donating clothes, childcare, yeah. And so like making the noise, right, is I think very often self-serving. And we like to think that we're making an impact. Now we might be making an impact in our community, right? And of course, you know, these folks are a part of our community, but so often the impact stays closer to our homes. That's what I'll say about that.
Can I just riff off of that? Because I just think that's so important to talk about the worry of it that's becoming on us. And I know that you know, as an artist, you want to make something that's very cathartic for your audience, right? You want them to go through an experience, but then you always run the risk of you know, if it's so cathartic that they just at the end they're phew, okay, I went through that. And don't continue to ask questions. It is important that we do rile people up and you know, make them feel activated in a way.
Did you want to talk about that artistic impulse and activism and how you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, who's the art for? I mean, it's a pretty basic question that any artist is always asking themselves. And then when you introduce a sort of justice or social justice or any kind of justice into it, it changes it. Because I think, you know, I mean, my mom used to always say that freedom is when you can live your values, right? When your actions are integrated with your values. That's when you know you're free, right? So as artists, I think sometimes we don't expand our values very far, right? We keep them inside of aesthetic principles too long, or we shelter them inside of our industry, our commerce, our careers, and we forget this other piece of it, which is who is it acting on and who is it really for? You know, I think in New York, the immigrant question is really interesting because a lot of times we're sending signals, right? We don't know who's receiving the signals in New York. So when we make creative work around migration and immigration in New York, there's this interesting thing, which is that, you know, as many as 1 million undocumented people might encounter it. And you're sending a signal that you care about them, even if they're not the direct recipient of your work, right? So, I mean, there's interesting layers in your audience in a place like New York. I think the difficult thing is that you have to figure out how to make things work on so many levels, right? It has to work for your artistic life, and that has to work sort of in a credible sense for a journalist, or it has to work inside the rubric of you know, legitimate social justice movement building and organizing. I mean, it's a lot to ask, really.
I mean, I think our work, though, can always be, or not though, but our work should always be, you know, engaging and reflective and pushing the conversation, whatever community it's in, for what have you. I think so often there is, I know I'm talking kind of in vague booking, vague book live. But I think often there's oh, well, we have to make a piece about X, you know, or it has to be, you know, about Y. And this is the way that fuck my hair, I'm pulling my own hair out with my ring, sorry. Who doesn't love a good hot mess? But so often, right, this is how you know, stories get essentialized, so that a story about immigration has to become about, you know, family separation, and you know, look at these. It becomes trauma porn, or you know, a gay story has to become about coming out, you know, whatever. And it's totally essentializing and totally dehumanizing, actually. And I think that no matter what the content, the form, the creators, you know, whoever they are, whatever it is, that there is always an opportunity to be really sharp and rigorous in our thought. And so often the art that is about X or Y is actually it's signaling that it's deeply engaged, but it's so often the most surface level. I would say, and that's why I think it's so incredibly important, if we're going to have this conversation about activism in the arts and civil disobedience, et cetera, that really I think the most important thing that any artist, any, you know, person who wants to engage in a meaningful way in these kinds of, you know, topics is to be a participant, which is why I started by, you know, the little things yes, healthcare and childcare and, you know, volunteering. But that for me, that is what influences my art making. That's not to say that every single piece that I do is about, X topic of being undocumented, but through my work alongside people, my critical acumen gets sharpened, and it's about also being in a place of, distrusting oneself too, right? Because, all of us have our blind spots, and this kind of work is what's going to make them visible, I think, to us.
I'm really glad that you brought up trauma porn, and I find it really interesting because when we look up what you've done, we see you on the streets. We see you actually on the streets, and in your bio, you actually have like, here's how you give money to this family that's seeking asylum, here's how you actually do it. And that your art, you're also in conversation with that. You don't just tell their story in a very literal way in order to get things farther, right? So I'm really interested in how the three of you actually think about putting together, seeing the wound, and how you move towards that in the actions of running for office and the actions of that. And I think you've already started to talk to us about Savitri, about how you're thinking about who is it for and how that works. But I'd love for you for three of you to go even farther into, from the identification that something is wrong, how then do you move forward into making something happen and making something change?
I did a lot of political theater, even like outside of undergrad. We had this group called Political Subversities that was, it was like a musical sketch comedy group focused on politics. You could think of it as like The Daily Show, if The Daily Show had like songs in it and song and dance. It was really fun. And in grad school, I really wanted to make something with like actionable items at the end. So similar, like, the cat posting the link to how you can help the family. I did this collaborative piece called Derivatives about income inequality, and actually Dave was in it. Dave helped out with it. But it was about income inequality, both like at a national level, but also like in New Haven. Like, New Haven is just so stratified. Like, there's like the Yale bubble, and then you can literally walk a block, and then all of a sudden it's like urban blight. So we had like a mixture of all these interviews from people of varying socioeconomic backgrounds, and it was a big mishmash, and it was a lovely project. And at the end, what we did was we collected emails from people to sign them up for this website called Kiva, which allows people to like send microloans, like small loans, like in like $25 increments to small business owners all around the world. So like $25 may not mean so much for somebody trying to start like a restaurant on the Upper East Side, but for a small farmer in the Philippines that wants to buy like the seed for that season, like that's a big deal to them. And so we sent up a ton of people to like to donate that and start that cycle going. Yeah, I'll just pause there.
I think in the United States, we have to reckon with two streams of kind of karma, right? The Puritanism and the white supremacy, right? And that every wound that becomes visible to us, those things are playing out in them. The Puritanism causes us to, seek out hypocrisy. Be perfect. We have to be perfect. In order to say anything about climate change, I can't ever take an airplane. This kind of Puritanism, which really impacts activism, like on an everyday basis, right? And then, of course, white supremacy, which is, the minute-by-minute analysis, self-analysis, community analysis, structural analysis that we carry with us in this country. It's our failure and it's our promise, right? We can do this or we can't do this. We're always grappling with that. So, when you say the wound, I'm like, I honestly I feel like we've been failing for so long and we will fail for so much longer that I don't know how to address the question, because the wound is like pulsing with blood, and many of us, I think, working in activism are like, just trying to stop the bleeding. You know what I mean? Never mind, like describe it or mitigate the pain, or we're just, please, no more blood. You know what I mean? I become speechless very quickly when we're talking about that. Of course, there are just a couple little things I think that matter right away, which is to ask the questions like, what are you working on? How can I help you? And that if we start with that position, if we start with those questions, that there's a better chance that we'll, staunch the bleeding a little bit.
Well, so you mentioned the family, the fundraiser thingy in my bio. So I'll kind of anecdote to how I got there, which I hope has some like practical application. So I also went to Yale School of Trauma in New Haven, Connecticut, and before I got to campus, I always do like where's my gente, where's the people at? So before I was even in New Haven, I did like a quick Google search, learned about Unidad Latina en Acción. I totally agree. Yale is a bubble. I think that's very intentional, not only on the part of the institution, but people kind of click into a survival mode. And say, oh no, I have to do this, I just have to like put my head down and burrow, forward in order to get through, and then when I get through, then I can help, then I can do more, then I can kind of like take my life back, etc. And I think that's totally a trap. I don't believe in that. That's probably a conversation for well, maybe today, but not what I'm saying right now. But anyway, I got involved with Unidad Latina en Acción. Community meetings, migrant-led organization that struggles for migrant rights and workers' rights, because workers' rights are migrants' rights and migrants' rights are workers' rights. Yay! So I just, I started going to meetings every Monday when I could, because I too am not, perfect, and sometimes I totally clicked into survival mode and I felt really shitty about it. But nevertheless, when I could, I did go. And it was through that I learned of a family in New Haven that both of the parents were going to be deported at the same time, leaving an older brother who was just a legal adult to take care of his minor brother. And so through Unidad Latina en Acción and through organizers in New Haven, there was an act of civil disobedience in front of ICE headquarters in Hartford, where we sat in front of the doors, 36 of us, comprised of Yale students within the area, professors, religious leaders, just concerned community members. We got arrested, spent time in jail, and then when we were released into the news that the family was going to be stayed together. There was a stay of deportation, which means that order of deportation was blocked, and the case was going to be reopened and therefore reconsidered. And so that was amazing, and a proof of the fact that direct action works. So I don't want to hear about how we don't know what to do, because that shit works. It was also through Unidad Latina en Acción that after I graduated and was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, a community member posted about this group called New Sanctuary Coalition, based here in NYC, that was starting to get together a sanctuary caravan to go down to the border, a show of people in solidarity to support the migrant community, the caravan. That was about a year ago. So I started to get involved in that. I went to the border, spent 2 weeks, which is, time and also like minuscule, working like directly with people. And it was through that I met a family, and I did not do what we had been told to do, which was not give out your personal information. I gave out my personal information like it was Tic Tacs and I was on RuPaul's Drag Race. And we stayed in, I met this family on December 29th, and they crossed the border the next day, and I'm telling you, I've never bonded with human beings that profoundly and that quickly. When I left Tijuana, I'm very clear that I left a really like intense, ever-changing, by-the-minute situation, and also I did not fully leave it because my phone was blowing up with people asking for help, etc. And so when I got the call from someone in detention asking if I could sponsor them, I said yes. I felt like I had to follow through, and I've maintained contact with this family. I mean, very more than contact, very close relationship with this family. And so while I've kind of not remained a fully active participant in New Sanctuary Coalition, and I'm so out of the loop. Anyone who's not there, like boots on the ground, is like out of the loop. Again, this one-to-one relationship. It's like what is the smallest, most hyper-local thing that I can do, which is be in close relationship to these, three human beings. So yes, when the opportunity to come here and talk came up, and I was asked for my bio, me personally, my bio is not my bio. My bio is a platform for these, people, and it's. So again, I know I just monologued, but it's how each of these really close, really small steps, meeting people and getting to know people and getting to know their needs, not what I thought their needs were, but what they told me their needs were, and then following through on that and keeping close contact, and instead of going big, actually getting really small and really specific.
Thank you. I mean, we always think about artists as expressors. And thank you for reframing that into how deeply can we listen? And I feel like that's so much a part. I mean, you were just confirmed as being a Brooklyn Democratic Socialist of America. So for the upcoming election, will you talk about that in terms of what you think about and how you think about listening for change?
That's a great question, because it's fun. So yes, I'm running for office again. I'm running for state senate in Brooklyn. And when I was running last time for city council, it's funny. People would say, "Wow, how did you seem so charismatic when you're talking to people?" And how did you do that? And I was like, "Well, it's just, it's listening. It's acting training. Acting is listening. That's how it transfers over." And the hundreds and the thousands of doors I knocked on to talk to people and just hear their problems. Really. I don't know, it changed me, but it also I guess it's something that, many politicians don't do. There's this notion of listening that I guess that's, as artists, we're just more in tune with doing. And it actually woke me up to a sense of really systemic problems too. And I know just even thinking about housing, one thing that would come up over and over and over again with people talking about their issues with their landlord or their rents, and always the story seemed when it was coming from them that they seemed like it was their own personal struggle and they were just their own little silo. And a big part of my campaign last time, and that'll be this campaign this time, is waking people up and letting people know that it's not just them, even though it may feel like it's just them versus the landlord. No, these are systemic things, and have you checked and have you seen that a lot of other people in your building are also suffering from this, or a lot of other people in the buildings owned by this massive landlord company are suffering from this. You're not alone, and that's something that we do. We do as politicians, we do as artists, is bring people together. And I think the person that said the pronoun was we earlier. That's part of it. When we're in collective struggle together, that's what we need to overcome gentrification, racism, sexism, these huge institutional systems of oppression. We cannot fight them alone. And if we are going to work together, yes, we need to be listening to each other. And it's very important. Even just knowing as a politician, one thing that I also learned from my last run was the importance of not getting set on an agenda of what I wanted to say, and that's close to what Kat was saying about really hearing not what I wanted, what I thought they needed, but what they just needed at the moment. Because I remember this one exchange really changed my perception with this woman in a laundromat. We were just talking, and I was talking about the campaign and talking to her about her experience, and she was talking about her fear of getting evicted, and I tried to tie it into a macro thing of talking about it, and telling her there's this massive real estate lobby and landlord lobby that donates so much money to upstate politicians to get laws passed that are in favor of landlords and building owners and people who own millions or billions in property, and go against laws that are for working people and for tenants. And she everything just went through one ear and out the other for her, because she heard me speak and then just said, "So I still think I might be getting evicted." And that was very eye-opening for me, because she had a very immediate need that needed to be addressed. So I don't know. I think that just moving forward, like, you know, there is like a lot of listening that needs to be getting done as we're going to be in like deeper conversation with each other. Yeah.
And you listen and then sing. Like, what a beautiful transference, you know, and you gather. I love what you say about gathering people to do that and that action in the streets. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. I mean, sometimes I think that like we've been talking, and we could have this conversation quite independent of talking about the arts or creativity, right? We could have the conversation and never address where it meets our creative practice, and it would be just as compelling and interesting a conversation. I think personally it's very, very difficult to talk about both at once and to do both at once. You know, obviously they impact each other, and those rivers and currents come back and forth because that's life, right? But you know, this idea, this sort of invented idea of the artivist or the, you know, art as a social practice. I mean, for me, I feel it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little projected. It's a little bit bullshit. It's a little bit like, really, are you sure? Because I think what we're doing is just plain old, like, good works, right? Like, is it creative? Is it artistic? I mean, sometimes it is. Okay, so singing, yeah. I mean, we have a community of singers, and we sing, and I've come to realize that we sing because we have to. We sing because it's the thing that keeps us being activists for 20 years. It allows us to, it makes it sustainable because it's a pleasure. Is it super creative? Is it, I don't know anymore. You know, I'm not so sure. I know there are times when our work is on a kind of like a vanguard of sort of invention, like going down to the pit at Ground Zero and singing the First Amendment with, you know, Uzis all around us. You know, singing as you're being arrested, like staging actions in giant institutions and casting police in your show and then watching them do exactly what you said they would do. You know, those things, yes, it's very creative and it does feel like an artistic practice. But in the end, like when I look at the life of being an activist, the artist part is like, I'm an artist, I'm creative, it's what I like to do, I make things, given the chance, I will make things. But finally, the activism is about caring. You know, and I don't know, I feel like the projection of the two together is becoming really problematic. It's becoming a career, it's becoming an industry, and I like New Orleans is a great example. After Katrina, and why it's problematic, you know, after Katrina, philanthropists from around the world said like, oh, here's a perfect laboratory for us to do all this work. Let's send all this money down, we'll do all this creative, amazing social practice in New Orleans. And what it seems like it led to was a lot of not listening, a lot of kind of like spaceships landing with this sort of artistic idea of how to address the problem of New Orleans and the problem of climate change and the problem of this and that. And the justice kind of bled out of it, and it was someone's job all of a sudden, you know? And so I think, you know, I think we have to be careful about how we personally engage with it and say like what we call it. You know, like if I go after Hurricane Sandy and I like deliver food, is that activism or is that service? Is that an art project? I don't think so. That's like an old person who needs food. Do I need that to be an art project? I mean, I don't know. I don't know, you know, but so I think we have to be really hard on ourselves, you know, as artists to say like, maybe it's okay if it's not, that's not an art project, that's just delivering food to someone who can't go up and down the damn stairs. So I want to be careful about it, but then I want to say like, it is incredible to go with the group of allies and like an affinity group on the street and sing music that you've worked on and sing songs that you've developed over years that came from like real experiences with, you know, Ravi from New Sanctuary Coalition, we met him the day he came out of detention in 2009 and we sang to him on the street. And I have to tell you, for all of us, it was like the sky opening, and you don't ever turn your back on that relationship you make. When you walked that family across the border, you know, that's real in your life, right? Your legs are built of that now, right? And your work will reflect that no matter what, if you address it explicitly or not. But the singing, it adds up. It's good. I mean, we should all sing. Everyone here should sing. It makes you feel better. You know?
Yeah, I didn't go to Tijuana as an artist, per se. I went as myself, a community member who recognized that, these folks, by wanting to be a part of the community, are already a part of the community. And I think that when we get hung up on and we let, the art, whatever, lead, that impulse, lead, that's when it becomes a kind of excursion, right? That's when it becomes, a kind of like tour of, this place and this problem and these people and this problem and my common denominator ability, rather than really listening and hearing. And it's like I know I keep saying this, but it's so, so true. It's in the tiny, minutia, bullshit, everyday needs. Resistance isn't always the thing that's going to make the front page, the thing that brings glory, right? Resistance and disruption often look like, not meeting quota, being intentionally taking your time, healing yourself. I mean, and again, for however you are in relationship to the issue at hand is going to really shape, I think, the limits of one's ability to, lead. I think that people that are most, and this is not an original thought, but I subscribe to the idea that folks who are closest to the issue should be the ones to lead, and we should be the ones listening. And, if we can be on the, taking some of taking some of the blows, let's do that. If we can be the ones that are, raising money, donating money, if we have a space that we can offer, et cetera. But it's about really listening to the immediate need. And in order to hear that immediate need, you have to be in community. There's no other way than to get to know the people around you so that it doesn't become an issue, so that it doesn't become, the topic of a conversation at a university that is disengaged. It's so easy to do. And I can say, I'm documented. My dad is not a citizen, he's a resident. And so much of what I know is from becoming close friends and co-conspirators with people who are, centered in the thing that we're trying to undo.
Absolutely not. Art becomes an imperialist colonist act.
Yeah.
So quickly and so easily. I want to make sure that folks have time to ask questions if they would like of folks up here. Does anybody? Yeah.
Oh, here, let me give you a microphone so you can capture in the recording for people who are watching.
Oh, very interesting. I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've filmed Reverend Billy and Savitri and the Stop Shopping Choir since the early 2000s, among others. And one of the things you mentioned about 9/11 being a changing factor, I was sitting on my terrace on the 20th floor watching the tower, one tower, and then the next tower, and I'm thinking to myself, as I was involved with the New York City school system, helping develop their Project Arts system, and I said, wow, we're going to have thousands of kids who are going to be suffering from PTSD, their parents are going to be, and then all of a sudden I realized, how do you make sense out of things that don't make sense? And I said, well, art makes sense out of things that don't make sense. And then I thought to myself, well, what is damaged? And I thought, well, maybe it's the imagination that's damaged. And maybe the value of art is caring for our imagination, both as individuals and as a collective society. And about the power of one person to make a difference. And we can all make that difference. And you are making that difference. How do we encourage others to do that as individuals? Any thoughts?
I mean, I I'm a big fan of just literally just telling people, well, one, after I ran for office the first time, I was like, well, everyone should do this. Everyone should run for office. Which it's an experience that or in some form that everyone should take on the experience of running for something, some kind of position. It doesn't have to be like elected, in government, but you're a school board if you live in a place with school boards, or if you're in a union, a place within your union, so on and so forth. But if not that, I'm also a big fan of just telling people just to get involved in campaigns, and not necessarily an electoral campaign. It doesn't need to be for a person, but there's always a ton of issue-based campaigns that are going on at any time, whether it's an issue for housing justice or healthcare justice or racial justice, or just there's something so activating about working on a campaign, like the timetables that you have to work on, learning how to just talk to people about their issues and activate them into fighting for something. And it's something that's really enriching too. To be fighting for something and fighting for something specific and knowing there's a very clear goal and oh my gosh, okay, so if we can all get together, we can make this many phone calls and collect and convince this many politicians. It's something that I think is really exciting for people, and it really changes it makes you feel very empowered, I think. And also, I think it ends up being a snowball effect. Once you do more, you just want to do even more and more and more and more and more and more. So those are my two things.
I'll say something. I'm not going to be somebody who rails against this because I think this is an amazing tool. I know that there's absolutely a critique. People are so glued to their phones, and the kind of showing up becomes virtual, and it's hacktivism or whatever. I think this is an incredible tool. When it's about connecting and getting the invitation out there, and I think showing up is the most important part. So when you have, if you are starting to get involved, how do you get someone to go to a dinner you want to go to, or try a new restaurant, or go to an event that you're going to? You have a relationship with them, and you invite them, and you let it be known why you want to go and why you think it would be cool if they went too. And it's about the one-to-one, personal, intimate relationship. It's hard, to just kind of put something out there. Even if generally broadly, I'm posting something online, people are going to look at it. They have a relationship to me, I have a relationship to them, and so, I think putting the invitation out there, however that form, whether it's a text or a tweet or whatever, is important, and following through is also, something that we should all do. So it's not just words, but and again, it's not the thing that's always going to be visible. It's going to be the invisible thing, but somebody sees you doing it. Even if it's not broadcast, somebody in your close circle or whatever sees you doing it. You get them involved, and then the more that they become involved, the more that you learn how to again follow through, show up, bring more people into the circle.
And I think also we all have to look in our own lives where we can do it, right? Some of us are in institutions where we can't cross those borders in those institutions, or at our job in particular ways, or say in your personal relationship, right? You can't necessarily defend your pussy in a particular way in your relationship. Or I'm saying that all of us have a border that we can cross somewhere. Right? And it's about looking for it and being willing to do it. And I think that sounds so simple. It's just go do that. But actually it's not simple at all, because we don't realize how prescribed our behavior is now. We don't realize how conformist we've become. We don't realize the way the monoculture has come down into every cell in our body, and that we're all behaving in very narrow ways, right? And that if in my relationship I decide to act out or to defend myself, or if in my institution I decide to stand up and defend my whole cohort, or any number of things. But I think the key now is to choose one and do it, instead of and so I think we can encourage our friends and our communities and have that radiant sphere come from ourselves, right? It glows outward, and we can do that. But I think it's just as much I'm also at this place where I think, I am not here to convince any of you to be more activist. If the conditions that you are in have not convinced you, I don't know what the fuck will, honestly. And I mean that in like the best way, but like, am I gonna do that? Am I that powerful? You know, are we gonna do that? It's not up to us, it's up to everyone. And so I think we have to be harder on each other too, like invite each other, but be much harder on each other and make that demand of each other and not like, oh, you'll really, I mean, yeah, it's tough right now to get people to cross that line, but it's happening.
Yeah, I see the illness of America as being couched in apathy and comfort.
Yeah.
And that it's so easy to be there. And so most of my work happens in China. And one of my dear friends, Jian, you know, he did not sign the Human Rights Declaration that put Liu Xiaobo in jail. And that when he won the Nobel Peace Prize for it, he was not able to attend because he was still in jail and his wife, Liu Xia, was in house arrest for how many years? Every single person who signed that and their families were jailed or in house arrest or their careers completely dissipated. He did not sign, and to this day he wonders if he should, but he also knows that he's able to have a child and he's able to do all the work he's able to do because he did not sign. And that kind, like when I'm talking to him, that kind of urgency, that kind of understanding of what things cost, and that deep connection to all of that is, I feel, a place where in the American dream, we have lost. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, I'm feeling a lot of grief, actually.
Yeah. Would you
A lot of
speak
grief.
into the piece of what I'm hearing?
You know, as an artist, as a theater person, as a filmmaker,
You're being recorded.
I've been involved in everything since mid-50s, in my small way, or, you know, all kinds of stuff. And I find myself in the last year or two working with Extinction Rebellion and other climate change groups, including Fridays for Future last week, helping as I can, doing what I can in there. And I'm feeling two really strong things. One is that my community, artists of the left, political people, I find enormous timidity. I find kind of business as usual, even among those that I love. What we're facing is the end of life on Earth. I don't have to say that to anybody here. We all know it. And the part of it is that the poorest and the blackest of people will suffer, but everyone's going to suffer. Everyone, including all the species. And there's just no sense that that's where we're at. You know, the 4 million kids and their supporters, fantastic. I don't hear it talked about in groups like this. I don't hear us understanding that they don't have an agenda, they don't know what they're doing, they're just walking out. I talk with them, they're smart, but I don't feel the connection between that impulse, on one hand, which is inspiring and great, the catastrophe that we're in the midst of, and my fellow intellectual, artist, political people. I don't feel connection at all. It's like there's no, you know, I go out on the street and I play Trump and I do that, and I go out and I play cops and I do my thing. I've done that for 50 years and it feels good. I love it. Yeah, it feels good. Is that enough? No. We need something else to to bring out, we've got to shut it down. Obviously, there's going to have to be 4 million people who go out and say, we're not going home. The Pentagon is not going to work. Parliament is not going to. We all know politically, unless we shut it down, it will shut down. And I think as artists and intellectuals, I'm struggling to try to figure out, as one of us, I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I was in the Living Theater, Bread and Puppet. We all did all that.
But let me just
right?
interrupt you to say one thing, which is
Thank you.
remember that you know nothing. Remember that none of us really know anything. All we have is our very narrow historical view that always favored a few people anyway and is totally suspect. So remember that and know that change is dynamic and that things happen in dynamic ways, that you, whoever you are and whatever life you've had, can't possibly imagine or know.
Can't possibly imagine or know what.
The dynamic change that may or may not come.
Yeah, but if we can't figure it out, we're in deep trouble.
You've never been able to figure it out before.
We
Humans.
stopped the war.
Well,
Civil rights succeeded. Women got the right to vote. India became an independent country. There are victories. Where is this? What is this strategy? I don't hear shit about that from us. From me. Excuse me. This is not an accusation.
I love that comment. I love that frustration because I sympathize with this notion of like, you go out and you do something in the street, a performance piece, and that's not enough. And then I understand the frustration because it seems like 4 million people marched, and then that also wasn't enough. And if we were to talk about it, would that be enough? And so, what is it going to take? I remember speaking to another group of artists a couple years ago when I was running, and I just said like one of the most beautiful things I love about artists that we're such passionate people and so like fueled up with like fire that like I just find as we shine so brightly that we ignite the people around us. And I think it's almost like our the duty of artists to just wake people up around them. I just want to cite on something like none of us know, right? Like we don't know, but if you wake enough people up, like I think we can make some kind of lasting change. And maybe it's the duty. If 4 million people isn't enough, then maybe 8 million people is, right? Or if that's not, then maybe 20 million people is. But maybe the step is that we don't stop until we can't find anyone else around in our local circle that we need to get involved. And yeah, I would say, the planet's burning. So I can speak. I haven't done enough. I don't know if anybody's done enough yet. These things are still really going terribly, and it's very frustrating, and it's very scary, and especially for people that are going to be here for the next, or alive for the next 50, 60, 70 years in whatever case world it's going to be. And I really appreciate that frustration because that's what we need, and we need to continue to affirm that like until like we start reducing carbon levels in the atmosphere, everything is not enough. Everything we've done so far is not enough because it's still the climate crisis is still getting worse.
I think this is a good example of like the micro versus the macro, and these struggles are always concurrent, happening at the same time. Progress is not neat. There are in fact people who are struggling and figuring it out. I think the students who are at the forefront, the young people who are at the forefront of the climate struggle right now are, as you said, incredibly smart. And they're not just walking out. They have, a message. I think if there is frustration, if anyone's feeling frustration about, and not just you, but folks listening, of like what to do, like nothing's happening, whatever. Okay, maybe my calling then is not to be one of those people who's figuring it out. Maybe my calling is to feed people in my community. Again, hyper-local, because some people's existence is their resistance, right? And maybe my work is to facilitate, to make things a little bit easier for them and be in community. So I don't think, at the same time that it's incredibly important, yes, to be having, the conversations and doing the things that are at the global level, because our liberation, again, not an original thought, but our liberation is collective and bound up in each other's. And we also have to trust that people who are, really at the center are holding it down and are pushing us forward, and sometimes our job is to get behind them, to fall back, and not to become, I'm not saying to become passive, or to get paralyzed by, you know, our frustration or our feeling. Sometimes falling back, again, is listening, is being deep in community, you know, and really, really, really just doing like the minute bullshit that seems like it doesn't make a difference, but does. Because, you know, from the folks that I've talked to that were in detention, the things that were most meaningful were letters.
It's what
Or
you
visits.
said. It's what you said at the very beginning of this. I'm Sanaz. I'm one of the co-creators with Hi. It's what you said at the very beginning, which is, you know, making it we have to do something about this makes it about us rather than really looking to what needs to be supported. And I think what Greta Thunberg and like all of those kids are doing needs support, and we can continue to support them in the ways that you said with Friday Futures, or I forgot the name of the Fridays for Future. But that just continuing to believe that there is a continuum and that it's a constant moving forward, and this like sense of patience that I think I see in the way that you guys all are talking about the work you're doing and the way that you have patience for each other and for us. I think that's a huge part of it, and it's really inspiring to hear that the small things and the the localized things and decentralized things actually do make a difference, even if we can't see it in this tiny moment, that it's such a longer experience than what we can imagine. Yeah, sorry, I just piggyback on that. That was great.
I just want to plug a campaign real quick, just because I love plugging campaigns. But if you are in New York, if you're watching and you live in New York, I want to plug the Public Power campaign, which is just a campaign to build an energy system that's run by the public, by the people, as opposed to by a business or a corporation. And like, yes, I'm in the Democratic Socialists of America. I am a socialist, but you don't need to be a socialist to be part of the campaign. You just need to agree that perhaps we can move further. We can move much more quickly to a system that isn't based on fossil fuels if energy is run by people who don't have a financial interest in maintaining fossil fuels. If it truly is energy for the people and not influenced by whatever can make the most money at that time.
Yeah, and I think it's there are things today that anyone here can do. Like New Sanctuary Coalition, you can go join their accompaniment program, their Pro Se clinic. They need people all the time, especially Spanish speakers. And if you want to go try and stop a fracked gas power plant in 3 weeks' time that's going to come online in about a month's time, please talk to me. We'll probably have many hundreds of people trying to stop that. I mean, there are so many things one can do right now, today.
Cool. I'm gonna do it too. I sense that we're wrapping up. Dope. So if you want to get involved, there are various ways. I mean, these are some that I happen to have some level of relationship to. The Asylum Seekers Sponsorship Project. If you Google Asylum Seekers Sponsorship Project, you will get a hit for Asylum Seekers Sponsorship Project.org. It's a project that comes out of Surge, showing up for racial justice. And if you have a space, if you want to find out how you can become a sponsor for somebody, if you have a space to offer a migrant, this is a way to do that. That is, I would say, a kind of high level of commitment. Another way to commit is you can donate your unused airline miles to Miles for Migrants. That's Miles, the number 4, Migrants. Super simple. Doesn't cost you literally anything. You can send letters to people in detention via Flowers on the Inside. Flowers on the Inside. And then you can donate funds to the following organizations: Al Otro Lado, which is a group that is based in Tijuana and San Diego. Amazing lawyers, amazing on-the-ground work. Unlocal, specific to New York. Make the Road, which has its headquarters in New York and also chapters in other parts of the country. Central American Legal Assistance, based in New York. Really small, operation, really big impact. Catholic Charities does incredible work. With an immigration help desk that is traveling, clothing donation, free lawyer services. There's also the Transgender Law Center's Black LGBTQIA+ Migrant Project. So often, Black folks and LGBTQIA+ community is, decentered, forgotten, and the impact here is huge. And Kids in Need of Defense, KIND, which is an organization that offers pro bono legal services to minor migrants. Those are, again, just some of the ways to get involved. Some of them ask for your space, some of them ask for your funds, some of them ask for your time, and some of them just ask for you to give a flying fuck.
In her Nobel Prize acceptance speech, Wisława Zaborska, who is a Polish poet and Holocaust survivor, talks about how people think that artists have a monopoly on inspiration. And she dismantles that. She says everyone has access to inspiration. A lawyer, a doctor, a janitor, as long as they do what they do with attention and love. And how beautiful that we can be inspired by all of those organizations and people that you mentioned, even when we do know nothing, that we can be inspired by all of those incredible people in order to take action in some way. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, and thank you guys, and thank you all for coming. Feel free to continue the conversation outside. Sanaz is going to say a brief thing about the next event before we wrap.
Hi, I'm just going to stand here. So at 7 o'clock tonight, we're doing there's this new initiative, and we don't really know quite what it is yet, but it's called Public Parks Project, and this is the first assembly. And it's an attempt to find a way to create discourse amongst people. I'm just being really general because I don't have my speech with me right now, but it's to find ways of getting citizens together in all 140 parks in the New York City community sometime in the spring. But we don't really know what we're doing, and so we are having this first assembly tonight at 7 o'clock here. There are refreshments and snacks provided, so please join us as we figure out. It's really just a time for us to ask questions because we don't have any answers, and it would be wonderful to see you there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Prelude. Woohoo! Oh, but also, great.
Five of you, because they're like around the city.
The film is about the umbrella revolution. I'm in an altitude, so I feel that very.
You must know Robert Rodríguez. So awesome.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of.
And you take me to the movie?
I graduated.
2018. Not too. So we don't know. What were you? Dramaturgy? Okay, got you.
My first semester was in
And one of the things I've noticed was lovely meeting you. I appreciate it. So public podcast again.
No, rather than, because right now, thank you. I love this.
Oh, love
I'm so all about this. I'm so all about this. All that stuff. I am so big fan of that. South Star. And no, now you're supposed to do as a strike, as a okay? June is the writer that Mao studied. Oh, but then banned because of his revolutionary thought.